Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there are diplomatic indications that the leaders of Rwanda and DR Congo may be willing to meet to discuss volatility in Eastern DR Congo that Kigali is denied sponsoring. Fighting between M23 rebels and Congolese soldiers has sent hundreds of thousands fleeing violence. Also, the head of the French anti-terrorism prosecutor's office arrives in the Rwandan capital on a landmark visit as the country gears up to mark 30 years since the over 800,000 Tutsis and their supporters were genocidally slaughtered. France says it wants to do more to track down perpetrators who may be hiding within its borders. And as Guinea heads into Ramadan, the rising cost of living is top of mind for many of the faithful. Authorities try to cap the prices on the most vital of food staples, but protesters say it hasn't gone far enough. But first, the leaders of embattled neighbours, Rwanda and DR Congo, may be poised to meet to discuss fighting in Eastern Congolese regions that Kigali has been accused of inflaming. Fighting between Tutsi M23 rebels and Congolese soldiers has forced more than 100,000 people to flee. There had earlier been rumours that Congolese leader Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda's Paul Kagame might be amenable to a face-to-face. And on Monday, Angola's foreign minister suggested that there may be progress on that front. Emmett Livingston tells us more from Kinshasa.
The stage is set for a meeting between Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda's leader Paul Kagame over the M23 conflict in Eastern Congo. M23 rebels, which are backed by Rwanda, have captured large chunks of territory in the region and have displaced over 1 million people. The rebels also continue to advance. Last week, the M23 captured several strategic towns in North Kivu province, and on Monday, the rebels took control of the town of Vichumbi after the Congolese army fell back. As this was happening, Rwanda's leader was in Angola's capital for talks. On Monday, Angola's government, which is mediating the conflict, said that Paul Kagame was open to meeting with his Congolese counterpart Felix Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi also recently said that he was willing to meet Kagame. However, he demanded as a condition that all Rwandan troops leave Congolese territory first and that the M23 rebels stop fighting. With the possibility of a president-to-president meeting on the cards, the question is now whether it will make any meaningful difference on the ground. Since the M23 conflict broke out in late 2021, several diplomatic initiatives have ended in failure. The most recent failure happened only last month, when Kagame and Tshisekedi took part in a mini-summit in Ethiopia, which was also mediated by Angola. The summit did not lead to a de-escalation.
Emmett Livingston there for us. Now, Chad's junta-appointed Prime Minister says that he has set his ambitions on the presidency. Former opposition leader Tutsi M23 announced plans on contesting the presidential elections on May 6, just days after incumbent General Mahamat Idriss Déby Itno announced his own candidacy. Clem Valla talks us through.
It's a long-awaited announcement. The Prime Minister of Chad's transitional government, Tutsi M23, has been nominated by his party as a candidate for the May 6th presidential election.
As a candidate, I'm running in the May 6th, 2024 presidential election to repair hearts, unite talents, and reconcile the people around the essentials in order to unleash the energies to transform Chad.
In 2018, M23 left his position as a senior official at the African Development Bank to found the Transformers Party. He subsequently became one of the main opponents of Marshal Idriss Déby Itno. After 30 years in power, the latter was killed on April 19, 2021. The following day, Mahamat Idriss Déby Itno, the Marshal's son, was appointed head of state by 15 generals. A nomination dubbed a coup d'etat by M23.
So it's clear that we don't want a coup d'etat in this country. This is they are trying to make sure that they will replace Déby by another Déby. Chadian people are saying they don't want the system Déby.
Together with other opposition parties, he organized demonstrations that were either banned or systematically repressed. The one held on October 20th, 2022 left its mark. Hundreds of young people were killed by police and at least 1,000 others imprisoned. While the authorities acknowledged only 50 or so deaths, Masra fled the country. He returned on November 3, 2023, 3 days after signing a reconciliation agreement with the junta, granting amnesty to all the demonstrators of October 20th. On May 6th, he will face the current president of the transition, General Mahamat Idris Deby Itno.
A top general from Sudan's armies ruled out a truce in the Islamic holy month of Ramadan unless the paramilitary group RSF that it is battling leaves civilian and public sites. The statement by Yasser al-Atta, deputy commander of the army, comes after the army claimed advances in Omdurman, part of the wider capital, and an appeal by the UN Security Council for a truce during Ramadan. Our regional correspondent, Olivia Bizou, tells us more.
Any hopes of a ceasefire in Sudan have once again been shattered. The army has said they're not going to approve a Ramadan truce unless the paramilitary rapid support forces which they're fighting withdraw from key provinces which they've now taken control of. The RSF, on the other hand, has said that they welcome these calls for a Ramadan truce. Now, the UN Security Council approved a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan on Friday. 14 nations of the 15-member council approved that vote, and only Russia abstained. Now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has really pushed for this ceasefire to take place, and he's warned people about the dramatic and horrific proportions the humanitarian crisis is now taking. The war risks triggering the world's largest hunger crisis. Currently, 90% of the population are facing extreme levels of hunger. That's according to the UN's World Food Programme. The war has already created and caused the world's largest displacement crisis, with more than 8 million people having been displaced since the war began almost a year ago now. Now, Ramadan has not prevented fighting from taking place in the past. Similar calls were made last year, but fighting continued.
Olivia Bizot there for us. Now, in the first visit of its kind to Rwanda, Jean-François Ricard, the head of the French Anti-Terrorism Prosecutor's Office, arrived in Kigali on Monday. The trip comes a month before the 30th commemorations of the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. Ricard says that he wants to ramp up cooperation with Rwandan authorities in order to fast-track trials of those living in France suspected of having taken part in the genocide. Clément de Roma has more.
According to the head of the French Anti-Terrorism Prosecutor's Office responsible for crimes against humanity, around 40 cases against suspected genocide perpetrators are currently ongoing in France. 7 men have already been convicted, receiving sentences ranging from 14 years to life imprisonment. Visiting Kigali for the first time, the prosecutor explained his intention to better prosecute suspects. Rwanda issued its first international arrest warrants concerning Paris as early as 2007, but France has only been cooperating with Kigali for a few years. For survivors' associations would announce the presence in France of around 100 people allegedly involved in the massacres. The procedures are too slow, but the prosecutor says that they are speeding up.
For the first time, by the end of this year, in less than 3 years, we will have 5 trials in the first instance with appeals procedures each time. You see, we are far from slowing down. We're doing quite the opposite. We are in strong acceleration of these judgments, and it is a decision that is deeply rooted and will last.
Several teams of French investigators from the prosecutor's office come to Rwanda every year to pursue cases. Out of around 40 cases, the magistrate specifies that a portion is nearly closed and will lead to judgments in the future. The latest verdict on French soil is that of former Dr. Sosten Munyemana, sentenced in December 2023 by a Paris court to 24 years imprisonment after being found guilty of crimes against humanity. His lawyers have announced their intention to appeal.
Well, as Guinea heads into Ramadan, the issue of inflation is on the minds of many. Over the weekend, in response to public pressure, authorities did try to set price caps on certain goods, but many say that they are still feeling the squeeze. Our team reports.
For the last 3 weeks, young people have been gathering in Conakry, banging on pots and pans at rallies loudly protesting the rising cost of living. Inflation has been a frequent source of frustration felt towards Guinea's ruling junta.
Food costs have soared alarmingly, but there is no democratic forum for people to complain. So we decided that we will make noise to alert the authorities.
In Guinea, the government regulates the cost of essential food items. At the end of January, the government allowed price rises due to generalized inflation in the world economy. But on Sunday, it cut prices again on oil, sugar and onions. Consumers say this move doesn't go far enough.
We demand a real reduction in prices of food to take into account the currently rising cost of living. Economic activity has slowed down and there is not even electricity, so the price rises we have seen recently are a disaster.
Over the last few weeks, a bag of rice, the most widely consumed staple in Guinea, has become 15% more expensive. The Agriculture Ministry says there's little they can do to combat international market forces.
Simply put, we are dependent on rice imports from overseas. The exporting countries are facing their own problems, especially in India, where rice prices are rising. That's why we've seen price hikes in Guinea, too.
A deadly explosion at Guinea's main petrol depot in December has also placed stress on the fuel market, further aggravating the country's inflation woes.
That's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
I'm Paul Rees, covering stories from Sweden for France 24, live from Stockholm and on France 24 news programmes.
Paul Rees, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world. 20 years on, the Madrid attacks remain traumatic.
We can't get it out of our minds. It happened to us.
For the victims and their loved ones.
The authorities keep asking us for new documents, as if they didn't trust us.
But also for an entire nation that does not want to forget.
We need to learn about this case, because if we don't want to commit the same errors in the future, we need to know how to react.
We adapted to the times to prevent attacks. That was our goal.
The 2004 Madrid train attacks, revisited on France 24 and France24.com.